Rainy ancient mysteries for sleep. The Great Pyramid and Atlantis. Tonight you do not need to solve anything. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to hurry toward an answer. You do not need to hold the whole world together. Instead, tonight you may simply listen. You may let the rain move softly around you, and you may imagine that you are far away from the ordinary shape of your day, far away from clocks and lists and bright rooms, and somewhere else entirely, somewhere ancient, somewhere quiet, somewhere wrapped in stone, water, stars, and time. Tonight, we will drift gently between two of the oldest mysteries ever carried through human imagination. The Great Pyramid, rising from the Egyptian plateau beneath a dark and rainy sky that never quite belonged to the desert, and yet somehow does tonight. And Atlantis, that half-remembered, half-dreamed island of wisdom and water, forever resting somewhere between history, myth, and sleep. You do not need to decide whether these things are fact, legend, memory, or symbol. That can wait. Tonight we are not here to debate. We are here to wander. We are here to stand in the rain before old stones, to trace our fingers over stories that have crossed centuries, to walk slowly through halls of imagination, and to let the mystery remain a mystery. Because some things are most beautiful when they are not forced to become smaller than they are. So settle in. Let your breathing grow softer. Let your shoulders lower. Let your thoughts loosen, the way mist loosens from the sea at dawn, or the way rain slides quietly from old stone. And now, very slowly, let us begin. On part 1, the rain over Giza. The rain begins in the strangest way. Not with thunder, not with a dramatic wind, not with the violence of a storm announcing itself over the desert. It begins instead as a fine, unlikely silver drifting across the night sky above the Giza plateau. A few drops at first, soft enough to go unnoticed if one were not standing still, soft enough to vanish into the sand and stone as though the world had breathed them in before they had the chance to land. Then a few more, then many, until the air itself seems to change. The desert, which in daylight belongs so fully to sun and dryness and open heat, becomes something else beneath the rain. The sand darkens by degrees. The limestone blocks of the ancient monuments gather a darker sheen. The silence changes. Even the sky seems to lower itself in gentleness, as if the clouds have come not to erase the stars but to soften them. And there, rising through the rain, is the Great Pyramid. Not a small thing, not even a merely large thing. It is the sort of shape that alters thought. In daylight, it can seem sharply geometric, almost too famous to be felt properly by the imagination. But at night, under rain, its true strangeness returns. It becomes again what it must once have been to those who saw it without photographs, without guidebooks, without certainty. A mountain made by intention, a line drawn against mortality, a stillness built in stone. The rain moves over its massive sides in delicate temporary paths, down the long angle of limestone blocks, across worn edges, into cracks so old that centuries have lived and died around them. Somewhere in the darkness below, and the plateau stretches outward in layers of wet sand and silent rock. The Sphinx waits in her own great calm. Farther off, lights from the modern city shimmer faintly, but here, in the immediate world of the pyramid, those lights feel very far away. It is easy in the rain to imagine that the present has stepped back a little, and that is where our night begins. You are standing not close enough to touch the pyramid, but near enough to feel its scale changing the air around you. The rain rests lightly on your shoulders. The breeze is cool, but not severe. The sky is low and deep, and every sound is softened by weather. There is no crowd here tonight. No lines. No bright day voices. No flash of cameras. Only the rain, the desert, the pyramid, and the long question of time. And it has stood here for so long that it seems impossible to imagine the world before it. Yet there was a time before it. A time when the plateau was only plateau, when the limestone blocks had not yet been cut and hauled and lifted, when no polished casing stones reflected the sun, when the horizon had not yet been interrupted by this severe and impossible geometry. Try for a moment to imagine that first decision. Not the first block, not the first worker, not the first tool, the first decision. The moment when somewhere, in the mind of a ruler or an architect or a quiet planner whose name is now dust, a thought became stable enough to alter the world. We will build something that time will have difficulty erasing. There is something deeply human in that. Not only ambition, not only power, but the refusal to vanish quietly. To place stone upon stone until memory itself becomes architecture. The rain continues and the pyramid continues receiving it without resistance. Water touches the stones, but the stones do not change their mind. They have outlasted dynasties, languages, floods of history, the rise and fall of entire ways of understanding the world. And yet tonight, for a little while, they are simply wet with rain. This small fact makes them feel strangely intimate. Sometimes the oldest things become easier to love when weather touches them. Weather reminds us that monuments are also surfaces, that eternity is also made of details, that even a pyramid, vast and severe as it is, can gather rain along an edge and let it fall in silver lines toward the dark earth below. You begin to walk, not quickly. There is no reason for that. Your steps over the plateau are softened by damp sand and stone dust. The rain gives the ground a quiet firmness, and the pyramid grows with each step, not merely larger but more textured. A corner block, a worn edge, a darker seam where water has settled, a place where the centuries have softened the face of the stone. At close range, the Great Pyramid is less smooth than the mind often imagines. It is not an idea here. It is mass. It is weight. It is hand-cut stone, stacked with care so old it has become legend. Each block contains labor. Each line contains intention. Each angle carries the confidence of those who believed that precision mattered, even when the whole would be seen against the horizon. Rain makes these things visible in a different way. Where the stone is rough, the droplets hold. Where it is smoother, they travel. On some edges, catch the dim sky. Some seem to swallow all light. You place your hand against one of the lower stones. It is cool, damp, faintly rough. Still, that stillness is one of the strangest parts. When touching a tree, one feels life. When touching water, motion. When touching earth, softness. But when touching a monument like this, one feels intention that has become stillness. It is not asleep. It is not alive. And yet it carries the residue of countless human wills. To stand here in the rain is to feel, perhaps more than to understand, that ancient people were not ancient to themselves. They were present. They were immediate. They were concerned with food, labor, pain, sleep, devotion, family, rulers, weather, health, hope, and grief. And yet, in the middle of those ordinary human concerns, they built this impossible triangle against death. The rain gathers at your sleeve, the wind shifts. The sound of the modern city is gone entirely now, or perhaps your attention has simply moved far enough inward that you no longer notice it. The pyramid fills everything. You begin to circle its base, slowly, like someone walking not around a building but around a thought. What did it mean to those who saw it complete for the first time? Not to us, not to tourists, not to historians, to them. Imagine the casing stones still in place, smooth and bright, fitted so carefully that the whole structure catches the first light of morning and the last of evening like a blade made for the sky. Imagine the clean geometry, the brilliant surface, the way sunlight once traveled over it before the centuries stripped much of that outward skin away. Now, and it must have looked less like a tomb than like a force, less like something built and more like something summoned. Perhaps that is part of why the pyramid continues haunting imagination. It does not feel quite like ordinary architecture. It feels like architecture leaning toward cosmic language, a line from earth to sky, a shape stable enough to outlast narrative, a body of stone large enough that people still, even now, speak of it in tones that belong half to history and half to myth. The rain lets up slightly as you continue around the northern side. The clouds above have thinned just enough for a few stars to return. Their light is faint through the damp air, but visible. And in that moment, with the pyramid before you and stars beyond it, the old questions rise naturally again. Why this shape? Why this precision? Why this insistence on scale? Why this effort spent on what appears from one angle to be a monument to death and from another a monument to continuity? Ancient Egypt did not separate earth and sky the way many later imaginations would. The world of stone, sun, stars, kingship, ritual, and the afterlife was woven together. To build in alignment was not merely to measure, it was to participate. Perhaps that is why the pyramid feels calmer at night. The day lets us admire it. The night lets us feel its original conversation with the heavens. And now the rain begins again. A little steadier this time, not heavy, only sure. The limestone darkens further. The air cools. The stars retreat behind cloud. And the whole plateau returns to that silver-gray dream state where time seems capable of folding. You come to a place where the entry passages lie hidden within the vast body of stone. Passages, chambers, corridors, ascending and descending spaces cut into the interior. Places once dark enough that torchlight must have licked the walls in red and gold. Places where air sits differently, where sound changes, where each footstep must have felt like an event. Tonight, we will not descend into technical description. We will not become hurried with measurements or arguments. Instead, let us imagine the interior in the way a bedtime story should, as atmosphere, as stillness shaped into space. Imagine entering, not now in the managed way of modern visitation, but in a quieter, inward sense. The stone passage takes the body downward first, into coolness, into close air, into a narrowing of the world. The rain outside disappears, and the sky disappears. The pyramid ceases to be outer shape and becomes surrounding mass, stone above, stone around, a narrow way ahead. This too is part of the mystery, that something so enormous outside could become so intimate within. A passage is a kind of sentence the body must read one step at a time. And in the Great Pyramid, those sentences are written in angle, pressure, weight, and direction. You move through imagination alone here, and yet the feeling is vivid. The smell of ancient stone, the air cooler than the desert night outside, the awareness that above you lies not merely ceiling, but an unimaginable quantity of placed and balanced rock. Somewhere within the great interior, there is the chamber often called the King's Chamber. Its granite, its stillness, its empty stone coffer, its strange calm. The chamber is almost more moving because it is so severe. No lush decoration, no crowd of images, no carved narrative spilling over every surface. Only line, material, volume, emptiness. Ancient mystery often becomes gentler when stripped of spectacle. This room does not argue, it does not explain, it simply remains. And perhaps that is why people have projected so many meanings into it. Astronomical, spiritual, mathematical, symbolic, impossible, extravagant, implausible, profound. Emptiness invites imagination. Tonight, though, we do not need to solve what the chamber means. We only need to sit with its mood, imagine it in darkness, then torchlight, then darkness again. Imagine the air not moving much. Imagine the long patience of the stone. Imagine how silence there would not feel ordinary, but architectural. Outside, a rain on the pyramid. Inside a room cut from the dream of permanence. How human to build emptiness on such a scale. How human to make a room for the afterlife and, in doing so, give the living a mystery they would never stop entering. You leave the chamber in imagination and return slowly to the outer plateau. The rain is lighter now, the city still far away, the Sphinx somewhere in the darkness beyond, the Great Pyramid rising at your shoulder like a thought too large to finish. Perhaps that is enough for the first mystery of the night. Not an answer, a companionship. Stone, rain, sky, weight, passage, stillness. And now, very slowly, the rain over Giza begins to blend with another kind of water, far older in the imagination, far less certain in the world, and perhaps even more suited to sleep. Our part 2, the sea road to Atlantis. The rain becomes sea mist, not all at once, very gently. The damp air of the plateau loosens, and the stone gives way in the mind to a different kind of vastness. Not desert, not monument, not the careful angles of limestone rising against a dark sky. Now there is water, a great breathing surface of water under cloud and moonless dark. The transition is so soft that, for a few moments, the two mysteries seem to overlap. The pyramid remains behind you in memory, cool, massive, still receiving rain. But ahead now lies the sea, and the sound changes from droplets on stone to the long hush of waves moving against a wooden hull. You are on a ship, not a warship, not a crowded merchant vessel, only a steady old ship made for distance. Its deck is damp, its timbers creak quietly, and its sail is furled because the night wind is mild and the vessel drifts more than races. A lantern hangs near the stern, its light swinging in a small, patient arc and laying gold over wet rope and polished rail. The sky above is heavy with cloud, but not threatening. The sea below is dark and calm, moving in long, slow folds like the breathing of something ancient and uninterested in haste. This is not a voyage of urgency. That matters. We are not sailing to save anything, not racing against a storm, not pursuing treasure, not fleeing disaster. We are simply moving, slowly and sleepily, toward an old story carried across centuries. Atlantis, a place spoken of, argued over, dismissed, rediscovered, reimagined, and never fully exhausted. Perhaps it was memory, perhaps warning, perhaps philosophy wearing the mask of geography, and perhaps a city that never existed and therefore can never be lost. Perhaps several drowned memories woven into one, perhaps something else entirely. Tonight, none of that needs resolving. Tonight, Atlantis is what it has always been in the best part of the imagination. A distant, shining question surrounded by water. The lantern sways, the sea murmurs at the hull, and the ship continues. When people first hear the name Atlantis, they often imagine catastrophe. A city swallowed, a sudden ending, a dramatic punishment from gods or fate. But for a bedtime story, it is better to begin before the end, far before, in the age when Atlantis is still only itself. So let us go there slowly, not into destruction, into presence. Imagine a great island kingdom beyond the familiar coasts of the ancient Mediterranean imagination. Would not a crude fantasy kingdom made only of gold and spectacle, but a place ordered with confidence, a place where water and stone and geometry and ritual have been arranged carefully enough that the whole city appears to have risen not merely from labor, but from an idea of harmony. The ship moves through mist. Ahead, very faintly, something begins to change in the darkness. At first, it is only the suggestion of stiller water, then the outline of low breakwaters, then lanterns, not many but enough, set at intervals along a curved harbor edge. Then as the mist thins further, the first true shape of Atlantis begins to emerge. It is not one shape. It is many concentric forms. Water, stone, bridge, water again. Another ring, another causeway, another wall. The city is arranged in circles. And that is one of the reasons Atlantis never leaves the imagination entirely. Its form is already dreamlike, not random, not sprawling, intentional, layered, like a thought designed to draw itself inward toward a center. From the outer harbor, the city rises gradually in terraces, white stone wet with sea air, bronze flashing dully under lanterns, wide stairways, columns, gardens set on higher platforms, water channels crossing beneath bridges, and at the center, farther in, a temple district crowned by a structure whose roof catches whatever little light the clouded night still gives. The ship enters the harbor slowly. Water changes sound when it passes from open sea into protected channels. Outside, waves breathe in long, dark movements. Inside, the water speaks more softly, touching stone, stairs, mooring posts, and the sides of other vessels with smaller and more articulate sounds. The harbor smells of salt, wet rope, lamp oil, polished wood, and distant gardens after rain or sea mist. Yes, gardens. Atlantis in the gentlest imaginings is never only a city of architecture. It is a city where water and growth belong together. There are terraces with cypress and fig, pools where lilies open, channels carrying water inward from sea and spring, courtyards with vines, inner gardens cooled by fountains. A city shaped by rings and water would learn quickly that stillness and motion are not enemies. It would understand how to let water travel while keeping rooms calm, how to build reflection into everyday life, how to make bridges not only practical but ceremonial. You step from the ship onto the stone quay, when the night here is softer than you expected, not noisy, not filled with crowds, only alive in a distant, well-ordered way. A few late lanterns, a pair of watchmen moving without hurry, the quiet labor of ropes being tied, a woman crossing a bridge with a covered basket, reflections trembling in dark water beneath her feet. Above, terraces and walls and columns rising in calm geometry under the clouded sky. The rain from Egypt has become sea mist here. It touches the skin in almost the same way. A coolness, a softness, a feeling that the world is slightly veiled and therefore slightly kinder. You begin to walk. The stone beneath your feet is smoother than the desert plateau, but still old with use. Water channels run beside the streets, bordered with carved edges. Some carry fresh water, some communicate with the harbor. Little footbridges cross them, and every bridge changes the sound of the city slightly. On one side there are houses with open upper balconies and shuttered lamps. On another, pillared halls, facing inward onto gardens. Here and there, a cypress rises, dark and narrow against the sky. Elsewhere, a broadleaf tree hangs over a courtyard wall, its leaves whispering faintly in the damp sea air. Atlantis, in many retellings, is described as wealthy, but wealth is not what matters tonight. What matters is order, stillness, design. The way the city feels made of repeated forms, circles, water, bridges, terraces, courtyards, temples, gardens, sky. The city seems less built outward than drawn inward. Every road suggests another ring. Every bridge suggests another enclosure. Every enclosure suggests another center. And you begin to feel that Atlantis is not merely a city to be visited, but a city to be entered slowly, the way one enters a state of mind. A steward of the harbor passes and nods to you, though in dreams or bedtime stories, no explanation for your presence is ever required. You continue inward. The farther you go, the quieter it becomes. The outer harbor still carries sounds of boats and rope and late arrivals, but within the rings the city becomes hushed. Water replaces noise. The slap of waves against quay is replaced by the softer language of channels and fountains. The movement of people narrows to occasional footsteps, a robe against stone, the distant closing of a cedar door. This perhaps is the Atlantean quality that most belongs in a sleep story. Not power, not spectacle, not downfall, but composure. Imagine a civilization so proud of its engineering that it arranges water with confidence, so secure in itself that it favors proportion, so certain of continuity that it builds in circles as if to imitate time, the moon, the sea, and the inward path of thought itself. You cross a bridge. Below, the water is dark and almost black, except where lanterns from the wall above draw narrow molten lines across it. A fish turns once beneath the surface and the lines tremble, then settle again. Beyond the bridge lies a garden court. The paving here is pale stone. A central basin holds water so still it seems like dark metal. Cypress stand at the corners. A little colonnade encloses the court on 3 sides, and beyond that are rooms with curtains moving slightly in the sea-cooled air. The scent has changed. Less harbor now, more myrtle. More stone after mist. A trace of warm bread from some unseen kitchen. A faint sweetness from night-blooming flowers. The city is beginning to feel lived in, not merely legendary. That is important too. For any lost city to become truly haunting, it must first feel habitable. Imagine the ordinary nights that must once have taken place in Atlantis, if Atlantis ever existed as a place rather than only an idea. Lamps lowered in inner rooms, cups rinsed and left to dry, sandals set beside doors, quiet conversations in courtyards, water heard through open windows, children asleep above lower halls, garden basins catching moonlight. Even myths need laundry, even legends need supper. Even the most impossible city must contain ordinary evenings if it is to become real enough to lose. You continue inward, higher now, are closer to the central district. The great circular design reveals itself more fully from one terrace where you pause and look back. Below you, the harbor ring curves like a dark necklace around the city. Beyond it, the sea. Within it, another ring, and another. Bridges spanning each waterway with elegant repetition, the whole city arranged like ripples from one central act of intention. The lanterns along the curves emphasize the pattern. They do not flood the city with light. They trace it. Tracing is gentler than illumination. It allows mystery to remain. And Atlantis, if it is to stay beautiful, must remain partly veiled. You reach at last the inner district. Here the stone changes. It is paler, smoother, more carefully joined. The channels are narrower and clearer. The bridges broader but quieter. The columns taller. On the walls less practical and more ceremonial. At the center rises the temple precinct. No need tonight to decide which god or legend governed it. No need to argue over source texts or comparisons or philosophical intent. For now, let it be what it most wants to be in this story. A center. A place where all the rings of water and stone and street and terrace have been leading. Not because power always requires a center, but because human imagination loves one. The central temple rises on a platform. Wide steps lead upward. Bronze catches lantern glow in narrow lines. The columns are massive but not oppressive. Between them, shadows gather. Above them, the roof disappears into dark and cloud. You climb. Not because you must, only because the city has been inviting it all along. From the upper platform, and the whole design of Atlantis lies below in subdued radiance. The sea beyond the outer ring is a black breathing field. The channels within the city hold smaller lights. Bridges arc over them like thoughts crossing memory. The mist has thinned. The clouds have broken in places, and a few stars now hang over the sea. How lovely that both of tonight's mysteries should return us to stars. Egypt looked upward through stone. Atlantis looks upward through water. The Great Pyramid offered stillness and weight. Atlantis offers reflection and circles. Both ask the same thing, that we let the ancient world be large again. Not quaint, not decorative, not merely historical content. Large enough to alter feeling. You enter the temple. Inside it is cooler, not cold, stone cool, sea cooled. The hall is wide and dim, and lit only by oil lamps set in bronze stands and by one central opening high above through which a little star-dark sky can be seen. The floor is veined stone. The columns rise like tree trunks made deliberate. Somewhere water is present here too, not visible at first, but heard, moving through the building's hidden channels beneath the floor. The temple smells of incense, long faded, oil, stone, salt, and the faint mineral trace of water living near architecture. In the center of the hall there is a basin, large, round, still. The ceiling opening above it allows one circle of sky to rest in its surface. Tonight that circle is dark with only a few stars visible through it. Those stars waver in the water, disturbed only by the smallest hidden current entering from beneath. This is where Atlantis becomes most dreamlike. Because now the city's design has led you not only inward, but downward and upward at once, to a basin holding the sky in water, inside a temple, inside a city of circles, inside a legend, inside the imagination of countless generations who refuse to let this place disappear entirely. You kneel beside the basin. The stone is cool beneath your hand. The water darker than glass. The stars in it seem deeper than stars overhead because reflection always gives mystery an extra layer. You look down. It is easy here to understand why lost civilizations attract sleep and reverie better than certainty. Certainty is bright. It names, it fixes, it debates. But reverie leaves room for water, for echo, for unfinished forms, for cities that can remain both warning and wish at once. Atlantis, perhaps more than any other lost place, belongs to that unfinished region. A philosopher's story, a mariner's memory, a moral tale, a mapmaker's temptation, a dream the sea continues repeating in different centuries. And because it is unfinished, it is soft enough to sleep beside. Imagine the people who might once have walked these halls, their sandals on the cool floor, their robes moving against stone, their hair still damp from the sea air, their voices low beneath the columns, the smell of oil and salt and evening. The city below them moving in rings toward sleep. Imagine the late temple keepers extinguishing lamps one by one, the channels carrying water through the night, the last boats crossing the outer harbor, the moon perhaps finding the basin after clouds moved away, the city at rest within its own pattern. Then imagine centuries passing, storms, quakes, a memory loosening, water rising in history or imagination, names remaining when streets do not. Atlantis vanishes, or half vanishes, or survives only in telling. But tonight, for this one quiet story, it does not need to be lost yet. It only needs to be present long enough for us to walk through it slowly. You leave the temple at last and begin descending again through the quiet rings. The city below seems even gentler now. A lamp in a court, a bridge over still water, a cypress shadow, a balcony curtain moving, a fountain whispering in some unseen inner room. The sea beyond everything, patient and dark. You return toward the harbor, not quickly. There is nothing in Atlantis that encourages haste. At the water's edge, the ship waits where it waited before. The lantern at its stern still swinging lightly, the deck wet with mist, and the rope wet and dark against the mooring post. The sea beyond holding no trace of the city except the low reflected lines of its harbor lights. You step aboard. The vessel moves away from the quay without drama. The harbor curves widen. The city recedes. Its rings become pattern again, then suggestion, then only a few lights held above dark water. Atlantis grows less visible but more beautiful. Distance does that to legendary places. It removes detail and leaves structure. It leaves the feeling instead of the argument. Soon the city is almost gone. Only the outer lights remain. Then those too are blurred by sea mist. Then the sea is once again only sea. You sit on the deck beneath the hanging lantern. Its glow reaches your hands, and the damp boards and the rolled coil of rope beside you. The waves breathe against the hull, and the clouds thin further. More stars appear. And because bedtime stories are kinder than most histories, you are not required to watch Atlantis drown, nor to decide if it ever stood exactly as you saw it, nor to choose between philosophy and memory. You only watched it emerge, walked it in gentleness, and let it return to distance. That is enough. Part 3. Stone, Sea, and Sleep. The ship drifts now, and the night grows softer. You have stood in rain by the Great Pyramid. You have crossed quiet rings of water in Atlantis. You have touched stone and watched stars in water. You have moved from desert to sea, from monument to lost city, from weight to reflection. And perhaps, without quite realizing it, you have also moved farther from the day you came in with. This is the quiet work of bedtime stories. Not to erase the day, only to lead you far enough from it that it no longer needs to stay sharp. The lantern by your side sways once. The sea answers the hull. The clouds continue opening. And above you now, clearer than before, is the night sky. You might think that after pyramids and drowned kingdoms, the sky would feel too simple. But the opposite is true. The sky is what remains when all human mysteries have finished speaking. Stone points toward it, water reflects it, cities arrange themselves beneath it, myths borrow from it, and still it remains patient, untouched, quiet enough to hold everything without explanation. The Great Pyramid must once have looked toward stars with ritual seriousness. Atlantis, whether real or imagined, must have placed water and circles under that same heaven. And now you, on this drifting ship between those two mysteries, do not need to know any more than this. Human beings have always looked upward and outward when trying to understand themselves. And when that understanding failed, they built, they told stories, they measured, they sang, they imagined. Tonight you did none of those things, you only listened. That too is enough. Perhaps especially at night, listening is enough. The rain over Giza is gone now, but you can still hear it in memory. The tiny silver lines over ancient limestone, the coolness of stone under your hand, the sense of a monument too large to finish thinking. The waters of Atlantis are gone too, or far enough away that they have become only the hush beneath the ship. But you can still feel their circles, the bridges, the basin in the temple, the lights of the harbor in the city returning to mist. Now all those images begin to loosen and drift together. The slope of the pyramid becomes the angle of a sail. The dark basin in the temple becomes the inner chamber of stone. Stars above desert become stars above sea. Rain becomes mist. Mist becomes breath. Water becomes sleep. This is the point in the story where nothing further needs to happen. We do not need a final revelation. We do not need a secret chamber. We do not need proof. We do not need maps or measurements or a closing argument. We only need the feeling that old mysteries have accompanied us gently to the edge of sleep and are willing to remain there, unresolved, until morning. The ship continues. The sea remains calm. The lantern grows softer in your eyes, and somewhere in the mind, far enough not to disturb you, and the Great Pyramid still stands in rain, and Atlantis still glows faintly through sea mist, and both of them, stone and water, have become rooms in which your thoughts may rest. So now, let the mind drift, back to the plateau, if it wishes, back to the wet limestone, back to the great triangular stillness under dark cloud, back to the cool passage within, back to the chamber of stone and emptiness, or back to the sea, if it prefers, back to the harbor rings, back to the bridges and channels, back to the temple basin holding stars, back to the city half seen through mist and lantern light, or nowhere at all, only here, with breath and darkness and the very slow movement toward sleep. The stars wait, the sea breathes, the rain memory fades, the stone memory softens, the ship drifts. Nothing more is required of you now. No answers, no conclusions, no holding on. Only this. The quiet after old mysteries, the softness after ancient scale, the kindness of not needing to know. The Great Pyramid stands. Atlantis rests. The sea goes on. The night deepens. And you too may rest now. Good night.